Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Sunday, November 9th, I believe. Yep, November 9th, 2025, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And as you can see, I'm out here in the van, and I've got a totally different kind of story to tell you today, and starts with the t-shirt that I'm wearing. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm kind of a t-shirt geek, and I've got lots of them, and way more than I probably ever lived long enough to wear out. And one of the things I like to do is I like to just reach into a stack somewhere one day and just pull one out and wear it that I haven't worn for a long time. Well, that's what I did today, and the one I came up with is this one. Get it up here where you can see it. And that, as you know, I was a Jeep guy for most of my life. I had 9 of them. And so I thought what I would do today is I'd talk a little bit about the Jeeps that I've owned. And some of the stories are kind of interesting, some are kind of funny, and some of them I had for a while, and some of them I didn't. But when I was wearing this shirt today, it kind of triggered a lot of memories, like a lot of things do. So I thought I would share that with you this afternoon. Just a little oddball thing on a Sunday afternoon that doesn't have anything to do with anything, but thought you might get a kick out. You might enjoy it, and those of you that are, that twist wrenches a little bit and are shade tree mechanics or whatever, you might get kind of a kick out of it as well. So, the first Jeep I ever owned, I bought one from a guy when I was 16 years old. And it was a 1953 ex-military M38. Now, in the middle of 1953 is when the U.S. Army made the transition from the old flat fender style Jeep to the new rounded one that looks more like a CJ5. And the newer one was called the M38A1. And the reason why they had to make a higher hood because they changed the motor and some other stuff, but this one was the original flat fender style. It was the original M38. And there was a guy that had that thing for sale, and it had a Ford V8 in it. It was the old Y-block V8. So that was kind of popular there for a while because the small block, the 289s and stuff hadn't come out yet, or they were just coming out at that time. That would have been, well, they came out in, 64? But anyway, this one had the Y-block in it, which is heavy, and it had wide wheels and tires on it. We didn't have the off-road tires like they have today, and so what the guys would do down there is they put airplane tires on them, and there was an outfit that made special wide wheels that would fit the airplane tires. And they were just rounded things. They looked like big round donuts. They had straight tread on them, so they didn't have a lot of tread. But most of what we're doing is running in desert and sand, and at low pressure they work pretty good. So this thing looked absolutely killer with a V8 engine and the big tires on it and all that kind of stuff. And so I decided, 16-year-old kid working a job, I just figured I had to have that. And so I bought it, and I played around with that for a while, but it didn't take me too long to figure out that I was, my eyes were bigger than my pocketbook, and I just literally could not afford to have that. So I had that thing for a fairly short period of time, and the guy that sold it to me agreed to take payments. And so when I finally came to the realization that I couldn't afford it and the insurance to go along with it and everything else, then I went back to him and basically gave it back to him. And he was fine with that. And I didn't ask for my money back. I considered that as a life lesson learned, and I made like 3 payments on it or something, so I had it for only like 3 months. But it was wide open, didn't even have a windshield, and that thing was a hoot. He'd originally built it to take it out on the sand dunes, and it was a hoot. And that really told me I wanted a Jeep again. So now I'm going to fast forward, and I went along and got out of high school and went to work and got drafted and went in the military and got out of the military and roamed around for a while and ended up here in Payson. And got a job as a mechanic at a gas station. And back in those days we went out and pumped people's gas and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, when you work in auto repair place in a small town, you're always hearing about deals coming along. There's always somebody wanting to sell something. And I hadn't been there very long, and somebody traveling through town came in with one of the original 1963 Jeep Wagoneers. And it had that oddball overhead cam 6-cylinder in it, and it had a 3-speed column shift, 3 on a tree we called it. Well, the transmission had gone out of it, and they were wanting to sell it for enough money to get the way back down to Phoenix to try to start a new life. And so I don't remember how much I gave them for it, but it wasn't much. And so I was only here for a little while, and all of a sudden I was in the car business. And so I looked around, and I actually found a 3-speed Jeep transmission, because that's what the Jeeps had at the time. But the one that I found was actually out of a CJ type, and it had the top shift. Instead of having the levers on the side that hooked up to linkage that shifted on the column, it had top shift. Well, I didn't bother old Chuck. I mean, the bolt pattern was the same, and the rest of it was all the same. All I did is I cut a hole in the floor, and I put it in there, and instead of having a column shift, you had a floor shift, which is actually better anyway. And I put that transmission in that thing, and I dialed it up so it looked good, cleaned it up. I remember it stunk to high heaven, and I cleaned it all up. I parked it in front of the garage where I worked with a for sale sign on it, and it didn't last a week. And I sold it, made a little money on it. And so, that was, that was kind of cool. I don't think I ever had that thing in 4-wheel drive even. And, but anyway, so that one I didn't have for very long. Neither one of the first two did I have for very long. Well, the third one I did have for quite a while, and I went to work at another garage, and I was making pretty good money for the time. And a guy came into that garage, he was a friend of the owner of the property, and he had a 1946 CJ2A, which was the little flat fender style. And he'd done a bunch of work to it, and including he put in one of the little V6 Buick engines, and we called them the Odd Fire V6 because the firing order was odd, and it almost sounded like a Harley, and they idled with that ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. And so they put one of those in there. And man, that little thing, and it put a fresh coat of bright orange paint on it. And man, that thing was killer, and I fell in love with that, and I had to have that. And so I ended up buying that. It didn't have a top on it, did have a windshield. And so, and I still had a pickup, of course. And so whenever the weather was nice, I'd be driving that Jeep. Summer, winter. The first winter, actually, that I spent here was the coldest winter I ever had. And it got down to 10 below about 10 days in a row. And nobody's vehicles wanted to start, but that old Jeep started right away. And I was driving that around. It was cold as the dickens. And I was driving that around on service calls for the garage, jump-starting people and pulling people out of ditches and all that kind of stuff. And I was tough then. 10 feet tall and bulletproof, Well, I had that thing for quite a while. And then I ended up selling that, and I had, a fella came in that decided he really wanted it, and I put a big number on it, and I made money on that one too, even though I drove it for quite a while. So then I fast forward quite a few years before I got another one. And so I'd gone to work at the fire department, did a bunch of stuff, and I had an off-road vehicle. I had a Toyota FJ Land Cruiser for a while, but it's not that story. This is about the Jeeps. So I went clear up until the early 90s sometime, and I was kind of looking around for a project, and I was single by that time, and was kind of looking around for a project vehicle, and I found a 1979 Jeep Wagoneer. Well, I remember that original Wagoneer, and those are kind of cool. I always kind of liked them. And this one had been hit in the front, and so the whole front end was smashed in. And so, but I went ahead and bought it. I didn't pay very much for it. I don't remember how much now, but I had a friend that had a body shop. And so I took it over to him, and he put a whole new front end on it. New fenders and fender liners and hood and grill and all that kind of stuff. And got it back drivable again. And so by that time I had a pretty nice pickup, and I didn't want to take it off-road and get it all scratched up. I'd already been there, done that, and had it buffed out again. In fact, I took it to that same body shop to get buffed out, and he told me, he said, this is the third time you've done this, and the paint's not going to take it anymore. And it's about the last time you're going to be able to get by with that without repainting it. So I started looking for a project, and I bought that Wagoneer. Well, I drove that for a little while, and then I ended up deciding to sell that one. And in the meantime, I need to go back because I'm way back. In fact, I ought to probably stop this and start over again. But then, no, this is WYSIWYG. This is what you see is what you get. So I missed one back in there. Back in the garage days, as I said, there's always somebody that's coming along and they're wanting to sell something. Well, I found I believe it was a 52 Willys pickup. And that Willys pickup, they weren't technically Jeeps, but a lot of the Jeeps said Willys in those days too, so I counted as a Jeep. But most of them came two-wheel drive, and a lot of them were converted later to four-wheel drive. But this one was two-wheel drive, and it had, if you can imagine, the motor had gone bad in it, and somebody had shoehorned a straight 8 flathead engine in it. I'm trying to remember whether it was a Hudson or a Packard, and I think it was a Packard. Before I upload this, I'll go in and look it up on the internet and double check, but I think it was a Packard. Big, long, straight 8, big, heavy motor. Well, in order to do that, they had to do quite the hack job on it, and they had to cut way back into the cab and cut through the firewall and do a bunch of stuff to it, and it was what we now call a rat rod. And I'd never heard of that term before, and I don't think that term had been invented yet in those days. But it was the classic rat rod. The thing was so heavy that the springs were collapsed on the front, which gave it a real nose-down stance, but it also meant it didn't have any suspension, and just the tires. And but it, as you can well imagine, that big old straight 8 motor had a lot of torque to it, and so it was kind of stupid quick, and it had so much weight on the front axle it would spin the rear tires, and that was kind of fun. And I had that for a little while, and somebody came along that absolutely fell in love with that and wanted it. It was yellow, and it was just a bizarre looking thing. And so I ended up selling that, and so I kind of forgot about that. I had that at the same time I had the orange CJ2A. Now let's go back to the Wagoneer. That 79 Wagoneer was a dark green, and when I put the fenders on the front, of course, they came black, and I never painted them. So the whole front end was black, and the rest of it was a dark green. And I drove that out into the hills a little bit and try to save my new truck, so I wouldn't tear my new truck up anymore. And so I had that up until I decided I'd sell that and started looking for another project. And that brought me forward to the I wanted one of the newer Wagoneers, and I wanted one of those with that fake wood sides on it because I thought that was cool. And so by that time, I was with the lady I ended up marrying, who is my current wife. She still put up with me after all these years. And so I was wanting to buy a Grand Wagoneer with the wood sides for her. And so I found it in 1986, and it was dark blue, and it was over in Cottonwood. And so went over to look at it and learned a very important lesson on that. And that important lesson on that one is you never go and buy a vehicle on a rainy day, because everything looks better in a rainy day than it does in bright sunshine. But it was raining that day when I went over to look at that, and I decided it looked pretty good. And so I gave the guy the money and drove the thing home, and it did look fairly good, except after the sun came out, after the rain left and the sun came out the next day, it needed some TLC on the paintwork and stuff, and so we did all that, and I started just working, fixing little stuff up on that, and it had a lot of little stuff that needed to be fixed, and but I finally got that, and I was paying very close attention to how much money I had in it, and I bought it right. And but just about the time I got all the little details fixed on it, it had the real nice leather interior and all like those things had. But just about the time that I got everything fixed on it, and I thought I was home free, and I was still okay money-wise in it, then all of a sudden it started making a real expensive sound deep down in the motor. A real deep knocking sound. So I took it over to a friend of mine that had a garage and had them look at it, and I'll be danged that I had to put a motor in it. Well, that meant that I had a lot more money in it than it was worth, so I figured I was going to have to drive that thing forever. And in order to get my money out of it. And I did. I drove that thing for several years. My wife drove it for several years. Ironically, she never liked it. And we took it on a couple trips. We took it up into Utah, and we took it to the Grand Canyon and Bryce and Zion and Las Vegas and some other trips. But one of the things that it did do to us one day is we were up going for a nice Sunday afternoon drive up on the rim, and it quit on us. And we had to get it towed in, and all it turned out to be was a broken wire. And Jeeps are famous for electrical problems, and turned out to be a broken wire going to the ignition, and all the bouncing and jouncing on the road finally caused it to separate and quit running. Well, the problem was that my wife she never trusted it after that, and she never wanted to take it out of town anymore. So I ended up selling that one. And I didn't make any money on that one, but I drove it for 2 or 3 years, so that was okay. All right, so now I kind of got away from Jeeps for a while, and of course I was heating with wood, and so I needed a pickup so I could haul wood and some other stuff. After she and I got married and she started developing allergies and we couldn't heat with wood anymore, then it wasn't as important to have a pickup that could haul wood. And I had some pretty nice pickups, and we got into RVing and some other stuff. And so finally, after I retired in 98, and so in 99, I got interested in getting a Jeep again. So I started looking around for Jeeps around town, and I found one down in Geisela, and it was a 1966 CJ5. And, and of course, they used that body style for a long time in the CJs. And so I went down and took a look at it, and it was all there, but it was kind of beat up, and I was looking for a project anyway, and it'd been sitting underneath a Palo Verde tree for a while, and it was full of leaves and all that kind of stuff, and they wanted a little bit more for it than what it was worth, but it was pretty much exactly what I was looking for, so I went ahead and bought it. And I brought it home, and I started working on it and fixing it up, and drove it for a while. But one of the things I noticed with that right away, and it was also a problem with my the CJ2A, and looking way back on it, it was a problem with my first Jeep as well, and that was those little short Jeeps. I'm a tall guy, and they don't have any leg room in them to speak of, and so they get to be a little uncomfortable driving them for very long distances, especially when you got to be pushing down the clutch and all this kind of stuff. Well, that 66 Jeep CJ5, it had that same Oddfire V6 Buick V6 in it that my 46 did, but that was the first year they actually came in the Jeep, and they used those for a few years. And it was a 3-speed, and so it was kind of a fun little thing. And after I fixed some of the boo-boos on it and had to put new seats in it and new top on it, and I've got a picture of that one, and I'm going to plug that picture in. Let me plug that picture in right here. Well, I drove that one for a while, but it rode like a tank, and it had suspension issues, and so by that time I started working at the car dealership, and somebody came in there, a friend of mine came in there, and she was a divorcee with a couple of kids, and she had a 1980 CJ7 Jeep. And she wanted something a little better to haul her kids around in, so the dealership there sold her a little better vehicle, but they didn't want her Jeep. And so I took a look at that, and I thought, hey, it's a CJ7, which is a little longer wheelbase, got a little more room in the front. And so I ended up buying that from her. And I sold the CJ5 actually to a volunteer firefighter that worked for one of the little fire departments that I was doing some work for at the time. And he was a little short guy, so the lack of legroom didn't bother him all that much, and he loved that little Jeep. So I took that CJ 1980 CJ7 6-cylinder 4-speed, and I drove that thing for quite a while. And I got a couple pictures of that. And before I show you the pictures, let me tell you what I used to do with that is it had the top and doors. And around the middle of March, I would take the top and doors off of it, and I'd drive it all summer open. And then around the middle of October, I'd put the top and doors back on it for the winter. So I got two pictures I'm going to show you here. And one of them with the top and doors on it, and one of them with the top and doors off of it. And I'm going to plug them in right here. That thing might have been my favorite Jeep of all time. I kind of love that, man. When you drove that thing, you knew you were driving a Jeep. Well, fast forward a little bit, and I got involved with the Four-Wheel Drive Club. And in 2004, we had a member of the club that bought a brand new 2004 Jeep Rubicon. Now, the Rubicon package came out in 2003, and this one was a brand new 2004. And I had told myself that at that time, I wasn't willing to go into debt for anything. The only thing I would go into debt for would be a Rubicon, because they had the lockers front and rear and the 4-to-1 transfer case. I mean, that was the absolute be-all to end-all of packages for a Jeep. Well, this guy in the club bought it and did a bunch of stuff to it, and then suddenly decided he was financially overextended, and he decided he wanted to get out from under that. And so I thought, what the heck? So I ended up buying that from him, and he took quite a bath on it. But I ended up buying it right, and I drove that thing for 12 years. That was 2004. I drove it for 12 years, and I thought I would have that Jeep forever. I absolutely love that Jeep. The only thing that I could say about that Jeep versus my 1980, and I sold my 1980, of course, by the way. And the only thing I can say about that Jeep is that it was kind of car-like. Now it'd go every place you pointed it, and I'm going to plug a picture of that in. Let me plug a couple of pictures of that in right here. Yeah, those of you that have watched my videos on the channel for very long, I've shown some pictures with that Jeep in them. Some of the scenery pictures that I've shot for Sunday Scenery, because I got a lot of pictures with that Jeep in them. And I thought I would live my whole life with that Jeep. I thought I'd never get another one. But let me tell you what happened. I started developing arthritis, and I started developing arthritis in my neck, and it got to the point that my arthritis, driving a Jeep, especially any place where there was any bumps, any rough area or anything, my neck would hurt. I'd be in agony for the next week. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're getting older, and this is what the thing is, and you're probably going to have this problem. And it just ate me alive, because I love that Jeep. I love going off-roading, but I didn't like being in pain for a week every time I drove it. And so I decided that, if that's the way it is, I'm going to sell it. And so I put out the word through the Four-Wheel Drive Club, and one of the members, the first guy that came and looked at it, he bought it on the spot. And, and I gave him a decent price on it. And that Jeep had, by that time it only had 55,000 miles on it, but it had been a lot of hard miles. I'd modified it quite a bit, put long arm suspension on it, and that Jeep, like I say, it'd pretty much go anywhere you pointed it. It was a very, very, very capable Jeep, and I'd had it all over southern Utah and a lot of different places. So that red one was Jeep number 9. And so in the meantime, what happened, of course, is those of you that watch the channel for a while, and about 6 years ago now, is I took charge of my health. I quit listening to the doctors, what they were telling me to do. I was on the road, slippery slope down into diabetes, and I fixed that. And there's videos about that. Actually, down in the description, I'll put a link to that one. I've posted it a couple times here. But basically, as a sidebar to, a sidebar doing that is, beside curing my diabetes and curing a bunch of other ailments, I lost 70 pounds, so I wasn't a fat guy anymore. And it also totally did away with the inflammation that was causing that arthritis. I don't have that anymore. I can move my head, and I can do all this kind of stuff. I can go for rides in Jeeps. I've gone out with some friends, and I'm fine. I could own one again. But right now, with my retirement income, I just flat can't afford one. And so that's basically why I don't have one. As you know, I got a fairly new truck and a couple of old beater vehicles, as I'm sitting in one right now, 34-year-old van. And I'm happy with that. But would I like to have a Jeep again? Yeah, I would. So, somebody asked me a while back, I said, well, if you could get a Jeep again, what would you do? And so let's go fantasize for just a little bit. And now, there's a lottery drawing tomorrow night. Now, there was one last night, and I didn't get a single number. I buy one ticket, just one. I don't spend a whole lot of money on lottery tickets, but you can't win if you don't play. And so I'll buy one ticket when it gets way up there, and it's up there over 400 million now. And so if I won big on the lottery, people say, what would you do? Well, I said the first thing I would do, of course, is pay off all my debts. I'd pay off my credit cards, I'd pay off my house, I'd pay off my truck, pay off my trailer, and I'd get myself totally out of debt. That's the number one. That's the first thing I would do. Second thing I would do is go buy another Jeep. And so what would I buy? Well, heck, I don't know. If I want enough money, I think I'd buy 3 of them. And the first one I'd buy, it would probably be a Gladiator pickup with the Rubicon package. Why? Because I think they're cute as heck, and that'd probably replace my old work truck with that, and that's what would be my daily driver around town. So the second one I'd buy is I'd buy one of the 4-door with a Rubicon package, and I would send it to there's a place in Texas where you can send them, and they take the top off of them and they extend the back end by about 14 inches. And they have actually a camper package that they put on them with a pop top that you can sleep in. So that you can stand up in them when you put the top up. You can stand up in them and you got a place you can sleep. And I would probably do that. And I would probably use that to replace this van. And so then what I do is I'd buy the third one. And the third one would be a 2-door, maybe even an older one. And I would make that pretty highly modified when I wanted to do some serious off-roading. That would be my go-to for the day. And that one would have a cloth top and half doors and all that kind of stuff, so I could be wide open with that. But, that's just fantasizing. It's always kind of fun to do that a little bit. And I don't even have enough room here where I live to park all that stuff, but if I had enough money, I figured I could fix that too. So just a little story on a calm, quiet Sunday afternoon, just a little something different. Let me give you another look at that t-shirt. And, that used to be my motto. But got one more little add-on to that, I think, that I almost forgot to tell you. And that is that the last fire chief's job that I had, my fire department car was also a Jeep. It was a 2001 Cherokee, the last year of the box Cherokee, the XJ model. And so, man, and that was when I still had my red Jeep. And during that period of time, and that was before my arthritis started giving me a problem, and during that period of time, I was in Jeep guy heaven. Because my daily driver was not only a Jeep, but my work vehicle was a Jeep as well. So I got to drive a Jeep all day, every day. And I tell you folks, that was Jeep guy heaven in those days. That job ended, and that car didn't come home with me, although that was a nice little car. I would have liked to have bought that. Eventually they got rid of it. I don't know what they ever did with it, but anyway, to make a short story longer, I guess I've done that already. And so that's my 9 Jeeps and my fire department Jeep. Let me put a picture of that fire department Jeep in here right now. I'll give you a picture of that. And as you can see, it's our engine sitting next to it, and it was mostly volunteer department. I was a paid employee, and I was the only paid guy there. But that's a whole nother story. So that's my Jeep story for the day. Then just something a little different to talk about on a nice day. So let me tell you, as I always do, take care of each other, love each other. Take care of yourself. Take care of your health. Don't necessarily believe everything the doctor tells you, because there's some things going on out there that, all the doctor can tell you is what he learned in school or she learned in school. And it's not always real accurate, and there's other ways to solve things. And so, as I said, I'll put that a link in the description about that beating diabetes video, and you can go back and look at that if you want to. But show gratitude for what you got, and I'm grateful for all the adventures I had. I used to say my Jeep was my magic carpet, and it took me places that most people never ever get to go see, and that's absolutely true. So I guess until I talk to you again, I've got another update coming on the Marlene incident, but I'm not going to talk about that here, but it's coming and it's interesting. So until I talk to you again, let me just tell you, peace out.